Hi, this is Kevin Greco. As already indicated on Facebook, we'll be answering some questions from you, and one of the questions that actually came in was in regards to child custody, differences between sole custody and joint custody, and how it can change, and basically, in regards to it, what are the grounds for sole custody and joint custody. In New York State, there are two, obviously as already indicated, there are two forms of custody. The first is sole custody, the second is joint custody, and another prong of custody is joint custody with final decision making. Now, sole custody basically means is that the person who has the child or the children gets to make the decisions as well as has the children living with them. In regards to joint custody, typically means that one person is named the custodial parent, or if it's a true joint custody, both parents have the children half the time, as well as they also get to make decisions together when it comes to the children. Joint custody with final decision making basically means is that, again, one parent's named the custodial parent, and both parents actually have to make decisions together, but in the event that they can't make a decision together or they disagree on one of the decisions, then one parent actually gets to make makes the final decision. There are other prongs to custody, other variations of custody, but I'm not going to go into too much detail because the question that was asked, what is the grounds for sole custody, what are the grounds for joint custody? Typically, the courts in New York State like joint custody. They like it when parents can actually work together and they can make decisions together. Now, where there's instances where custody may be switched from joint custody to sole custody, basically means when there's a breakdown in communication. And there's tons of areas and there's tons of case law in regards to make determination whether you go with sole custody or joint custody. Now, specifically, the grounds for joint custody, there is no statute or anything like that. But in regards to sole custody, what are they taking into consideration when it comes to custody? The judges and the courts always look at the totality of the circumstances, meaning they look at the case as a whole. They don't just look at one particular avenue or one particular situation. There are times where the child expresses a wish to the law guardian and attorney for the child, and sometimes that is taken into consideration, but that's not paramount. Other times as well, whether or not there's a possibility where one parent facilitates the visitation and fosters a relationship with the other parent, that's taken into consideration as well. Other things when it regards to it, it basically comes with child custody and what courts, and this is not all inclusive, there is a case law which is out there, which comes out of the 3rd Department, Storch vs. Storch, which came out in 2001, and I'll be reading which basically sums up what they're looking at. But again, this is not all inclusive, it's just a guideline what the courts can follow. They're looking at factors such as the age of the children. Now, what's the difference between the age? There is what's known as the tender years doctrine, where the child might be a little bit younger, infant, toddler, whatever it may be. There's usually sometimes that the courts favor that the child remain with the mother, but that's not always the case in regards to this. Other things that are taken into consideration are the quality of the home environment of each parent. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that, because sometimes there are instances where the parent, one parent makes more money than the other. Yes, sometimes financial considerations are put into place, but it's not, again, it's not paramount. And just because one parent makes more money doesn't necessarily mean that parent's going to win custody or win sole custody. Other factors that are looked into it are the relative fitness of each parent, the ability of each parent to guide and provide for the children's intellectual and emotional development, and the effect of custody award on the children's relationship with the non-custodial parent. Those are just some of the several ways that the courts actually look at compared to what sole custody is compared to joint custody. Again, the courts always like to favor joint custody. Why? Because they believe there's a public policy in New York State that all children should be raised by two parents, regardless of whether or not they're split or whatever it may be. And just because they are split, it doesn't make much of a difference that they are, as long as both parents have an opportunity to partake not only in the school, the religious education, as well as the medical decisions when it comes to the kids. Now, in sum and substance, whether or not are there specific grounds? Again, it's really what's known as the best interest test. What is the best interest of the children? Either the child or the children. And that's what the court's ultimately going to look at. They're not going to look at whether or not, it doesn't make a difference whether a parent makes more money or not. It doesn't make a difference whether a parent, whether there's some small squawks or arguments between the two, because there is case law which basically that is out there that says that even though people may not be able to communicate with each other, there is still some form of communication or that can take place between the kids and between the parents to order to facilitate decision and things of that nature. Now, if you do go to trial, just put it this way. If you do go to trial, the courts will ultimately give one party sole custody. That's a public policy that basically that's been standing in New York State for quite some time. Nothing which is actually written, but that's been standing for quite some time. The reason being that they do that is because obviously there's such a breakdown in communication, such a breakdown in their process between each other. They're not even going to be able to communicate with each other, and they're not even going to be able to cooperate in order to make a decision. Therefore, one of the parents needs to make that decision. Now, hopefully this is helpful to you. If there's any other questions that you may have or anything you may want to ask in regards to business law, commercial law, criminal law, especially DWIs, as well as family divorce law, as well as workers' comp, please don't hesitate to ask the question. You can email me. You can also Facebook me, message me on Facebook, or you can just post a question right online. Like always, we give free consultations. Hopefully, again, like I said, this was helpful. And remember, we're here for your success. Thank you.